Set. Boom. Hey, everybody. Greg and Rachel Denning coming to you from an RV in Texas, right? This is what's fun. You never know where we're going to pop up around the world and be like, hey, we don't know either. We have no idea. We're like, we hope this all works out. Just kidding. We're having a great adventure. I hope you guys are having an awesome summer and taking advantage of long, warm days and sunshine. Like summer really is for adventurers, isn't it? And I hope you're taking advantage of that, getting some vitamin D in your bodies. Okay, we're going to dive right in tonight because we got some great questions. So we love your questions. If you have specific questions, keep sending them in. We apologize if it takes us a while to get to some of your questions. We're thinking about it and we're getting to them, and we love the questions.
That's the nature of traveling sometimes.
It's crazy. So we're heading back to our home base, guys, and we're gonna lean in. So buckle up. It's gonna be awesome. Sure. So the big piece. Okay, let me dive in this way. What is it that determines the small things that you do, you yourself and your family, right? Kind of chew on that for a second. What is it that's that determining factor? What is it that makes those things happen day in and day out? You've thought about that? The little things of how you respond to traffic. How you respond to setbacks, the little things like what you eat when you're stressed, what you eat when a movie starts. It's the little things like, what do you do when you don't have to do anything else? It's all these little bits and pieces. What's interesting, like add it all together, all these little things, lots and lots of little pieces make the puzzle, right? They put together the mosaic. And as we've thought about this and studied this for years and worked with all kinds of families and really been deliberate about our own family, it really comes down, you guys, to family culture. It really comes down to the culture that you establish as a family. Now, you might kind of by default think, well, we don't really have that much of a culture. Well, no, like every family does, whether you're aware of it or not. You've already established your culture. Now you can change that and you can shift it, you can improve it, you can alter it, but you already have a culture. And it's the things you do kind of automatically by default, the little things that just kind of happen. That's the culture. And you guys, you've heard me say this before, culture eats everything else for breakfast. It consumes all the best intentions and all the little plans and all the little strategies. Culture just comes along and consumes all of it. When you get a cold, or when you feel hangry, or when your little toe hurts, when you're disciplining, when your kids are annoying, when they're in the back of the van killing each other, this is when culture comes out. And so one of the questions, in fact, both of the questions really fit with this. It was one of them was about how we respond to our children. And I want you, can I invite you, those of you who are with us, you can throw it in the chat if you want, but those of you watching the recording too, everyone just take a minute right now, maybe jot down some thoughts. How is it that you generally, most of the time, respond to your kids? So we might even phrase this question like, what is your response culture? I'll go first. I blew it today, you guys. I blew it. I was in my head trying to solve these problems, and I was feeling frustrated about the things. I was working with the government, so you can just, anytime you're working with the government, it's really frustrating, especially if it has anything. All right, I'm playing the victim here. But I'm sticking to my story. Anything that has to do with the DMV, holy guacamole, man, those people are less than efficient. So I was trying to solve this problem. I was frustrated, and my son kind of caught me off guard. And he's like, "Hey, Dad, can I do this?" And he just asked this crazy question, and I was like, "Of course not, right?" But it was totally wrong. And like I wasn't mean, but I just did that. I'm like, "No, of course not." And I could tell, man, it hit him. It hit him hard, and I could tell he was just trying to hold it together. And I was like, "Oh man, not cool." And I felt bad about it all day.
Was
Not
I
cool.
there for this, or
No,
did I miss it?
you missed it. And he handled it well. And I was like, "I'm sorry, man. I'm not mad at you. Here's what's going on." But I could tell, like, it was like I turned around real quick and punched him in the gut. And not cool. Because if I do that often enough, then that becomes the culture. And that poor son who's just so happy and jovial and wants to try things, he's going to stop asking me for things because he's like, "Oh man, I'm going to get that response from dad again." And it's going to make him timid and reclusive, and it's going to make him reactive to me. Are you guys rolling with me here? And then it establishes an interaction culture. So I don't want to respond to my kids like that ever again. And I think most of the time I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were.
Sometimes we have blind spots, right? Because we all tell ourselves stories like, "I never do that," and your spouse and kids might be like, "Ahem."
Well, this was a good time to bring it up, actually.
Yeah, well, I might actually have some feedback, right? But it's interesting how that does. Now, great comment here in the chat box. Sometimes the way he responds depends on the child. And so think about that idea. That's a really cool concept.
Well,
that we establish a culture with each child.
Well, that's true in a couple ways, because negatively and positively, sometimes the automatic way we respond to certain kids are different depending on the kids, because some are a little more annoying than other ones, right? But that also is good parenting, to respond to the kids uniquely, because they do have different personalities. So it is actually something we want to do, because we might think, "Oh, I want to respond to all the kids the same." But I have found that that's not always the case, because they are different and they respond differently. Some of them, I'm not kidding you, all I have to do is like give them a little look and they're like, "Oh gosh, sorry, Mom." But others, I have to go up and like, "Stop doing that. Like, what are you doing?" They need some physical touch or contact or something to like get their attention. So I like that. In a couple ways, that's true. Depends on the kid how we respond.
And so in that instance, and in all of it, the invitation today for all of us is to lean in to being extremely deliberate and intentional about those interactions. So, well, just in a general thing, you guys, how I love asking questions. How is it you would like to respond? What kind of response culture would you like to establish? I want you to jot down some thoughts, jot some ideas there. And really think through, what do you want that to be? I know for me, I want to explain a lot. I want my kids to understand why I'm thinking what I'm thinking, why I give the response I do. Because with understanding comes so much insight, and it changes their responsiveness, right? It's huge. If they know why we're thinking what we're thinking and doing what we're doing, they're like, "Okay, yeah, I totally get that. And I should have done that today." So instead of like, "No," I should have been like, "Well, here's why it just can't work." That's a totally different response. But instead I did that after I went, "Bleh," right? I'd already vomited on the poor kid. And then I was like, oh, can I have that back? Too late, right? You guys with me on this? Man, powerful stuff.
Well, and I have seen in my own parenting that this has made a huge difference when I can explain the reasons behind why I'm doing something. Because I know as a younger parent, I didn't know the reasons. Like I said no to things just because I thought that's what parents were supposed to do. Like I thought that those were the, like, can I do these things? No, you can't. And they'd be like, why? And I'm like, I don't know, because kids don't do those
Because
things.
kids ask for things and parents say no. I'm just leaning into my role here.
Well, it would be certain things that just were the accepted realities of life, like don't stand on the table. I don't know, things like that. And then it's kind of like, well, why? Like, why not stand on the table? That's a simple example, but it's true in that if I don't really know why, if I can't really explain why, like why shouldn't you stand on the table? Then I don't know, maybe you should stand on the table. Like maybe it's okay to stand on the table. I don't know. You know what I mean? So I started to learn how to be more articulate and thoughtful about everything to be able to give explanations. Now, some parents are like, well, that's just so much work. Like I should be able to say, don't stand on the table. And my kids say, okay, I won't because you said so and I'm being obedient and you're the mom. And that can have its place. I definitely agree. But I know now with our daughter who's 18 and she's moved out and she's, doing her own thing a little bit. When she comes to us and says, I've always appreciated how you always explain to us why you were having us do something you wanted us to do. She's like, it was never like, oh, you have to do it just because I say it. You always explained it in a way that made sense to me. So I was always like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to do that because that makes sense, right? So if I can explain in a way that makes sense to the child why you shouldn't stand on the table, like, oh, your feet are dirty and we're going to put our food right there, like that's a reason, then that makes sense in their mind and they want to do it, not because you're the boss and you say so, but because they also understand the reasoning behind that request. Anyways, that's just a thought. We have a comment here.
Yeah, great comments. Oh, hold on, one more thing though. On Rachel's comment about how many of you can relate to saying no a lot? Anybody relate to that? I think most parents are like, yep, that's pretty common vocabulary as a parent. And I know years ago we tried to say, well, what if we start saying yes to more things? And I particularly did this. I don't know how much Rachel did this. I started to try to see it from a kid's perspective. I'm like, okay, they want to like climb over the couch or they want to climb that tree or they want to just go get filthy in that mud hole. I walk up, I see a mud hole, I'm like, man, stay away from that. And they're like, Dad, can we go get in it? And the temptation as a parent is like, no way, stay away from that thing. It's going to be so much work. But I shifted and said, it's a little extra work for me, but think about it from a kid's perspective. How cool is that? And so I'm like, okay, go for it. Right. And I started saying yes more often. And in fact, it just happened just the other day. Our 4-year-old walks up and she's like, can I get in the pool in my clothes? I'm like, sure, go for it. And she's like, whoa, she thought it was so cool. Just bomb in her clothes. Right. And it's like, that's not that big of a deal. I had to wring out the clothes and wash them. But if we can say yes more often, then it gets rid of
more meaningful.
Yes, it makes no's more meaningful. They'll listen to the explanation because if not, a child will just right or wrong or whatever, like a child will just start to say, oh, my parents just say no to everything. And so you'll actually establish a culture of no. Mm-hmm. Who's with me on this? You can actually establish a culture of no, and the kids grow up with resentment, and maybe it's not even founded, but they grow up with a sense of resentment. Like, my parents just say no to everything. They don't want me to do anything. Isn't that interesting? It's just a fascinating insight. So, like, what's your culture? Do you have a yes culture of like, okay, let's give it a try? Do you allow your kids to fail and make mistakes? And you say, hey, this could be tough. Go for it.
Well, I would say that kind of ties in here with the comment question. We have a daughter who's angry about our explanations. She says that it's us intentionally manipulating her. We don't know how to change that. Yeah, I understand that. So there's a couple of things I do in these situations because, again, and every child's different. Some kids are like, they just accept the explanations, right? They're like, oh, okay. And then some kids literally argue against reality. You're like, why is the sky blue? Well, this is the reason. No, I don't think so. It's probably that. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, if that's what you think, you can't argue against someone who just wants to argue with you just for the sake of arguing and says that, your explanation of why the sky is blue is manipulation or whatever. So I honestly, in those situations, I'm like, you know what? You can make your own choices. And I'm sincere about this. You can make your own choice. You do what you want to do. Here is what I've experienced, or here's what I've thought about that. I have, like, my 10-year-old is like this. It's like the more I try to convince him to do something, the less he wants to do that thing. But if I'm like, you know what, do whatever you want, like, that's on you. Giving an explanation of why I think he should pick the one thing, or saying, well, if you do this, this might happen, and if you do this, this might happen, but you pick. Then all of a sudden he's like, oh, she doesn't care. Yeah, I'm going to do that one, the one I wanted.
Yeah. and here's why, and I think you guys will be able to relate this. If you have very strong-willed children, you know the ones that are like, yeah, then all you have to do is say, hey, you need to do that. And their response is, I'm digging in my heels and I will not do it, simply because you're telling them to do it. So with those kids, the approach she just explained is so powerful. You're like, well, ultimately it's of course your choice, but when I did this, and it's your explanatory style as well. We all have different explanatory styles, and we can pick up, like we talked about a minute ago, we can pick up explanatory cultures or reactive cultures to each child. And so if we're kind of edgy with one kid and the kid comes and they get our edge.
Well, and sometimes I think if I sound like I care too much, if I'm honestly like, whatever, do whatever you want, like I don't care, even if I do, then they feel there's something
disarming.
Knowing this, because I'm also this way. I was the rebellious child, right? I was the rebellious teenager. And so I know this about myself. Like, the more my dad tried to get me to do things, the less likely I was to do it. So knowing that about myself and knowing that I have some kids like that, I back off. And I'm sincerely like, you know what? Whatever. You make your own choice. You decide.
Now, with context, we're not going to let our kids just do really dumb things. And they don't want to. They're super good kids. We're constantly effectively, skillfully teaching them the principles, right? And they make really great choices. Really great choices. We've just trained them to do really good things. So it's not like we want to go do some dumb thing. We're like, hey, whatever your choice. Like, it's not that. Like, we're guiding them along.
Though, I think the reason why we haven't ever gotten to that is because we've used this strategy all along the way of, like, you get to decide. We allow our kids to decide as much as possible, as often as possible, because they're practicing
decision making.
They're practicing decision making. They're practicing using their agency. They're practicing being a person, right? So the more often they get to make their own decisions about things, even to the point, like, I guess what we're saying is, we'll let them fail. If we're like, oh, you're going to lose money on that, or you're going to get hurt, or you're going to, obviously not serious damage.
You're going to buy that piece of crap. It's going to be broken next day.
Yeah.
But okay.
Okay. Your choice. Like, I wouldn't buy that thing, but you go ahead.
Seems kind of cheap. Like, yeah, but I want it. Okay.
What interestingly enough happens is that they start to trust you even more, because they're like, oh, Dad kind of told me not to get that thing, but I did. And it ended up breaking. And so now I'm going to listen to Dad next time.
But everybody listen up. You cannot go back in with a I told you so attitude.
Yeah, don't do that.
That kills the whole lesson. You roll back in and be like, ha ha, what did I say? Right. The whole learning scenario and the gold there just got lost.
Yeah. What's best is you don't say anything. Then a little while later, when they've swallowed their pride a little bit and they come in and they're like, yeah, you were right about that. And still, you're
You're
like,
just like, it's tough. Sorry that
that's a hard
happened.
lesson.
And
Oh.
I know for some of you parents out there, and I do sometimes, I have to bite my tongue. I'm like, don't say anything, and just let them process it. And it might be, days or weeks or months. I know some of our older
Sometimes
kids,
it's
they'll come
years.
back, later and like, you guys were so right about that. Like, yeah. We're not like, yeah, dang straight, about time you recognize.
Sometimes
Right?
we do
'Cause
for fun.
that ruins it unless you have a really fun, jovial relationship with them.
But the beautiful thing about that whole scenario, because we're afraid as parents that something's going to happen, something's going to go wrong, and we think, I have the experience that can save you from this pain. Let me give it to you. But they don't necessarily want that. What they want is to learn on their own. So if we can allow them to learn, especially while they're still in an environment that's pretty safe for the most part, like I doubt any of them are going to be out there making a mistake that's has permanent lasting consequences, right? When they're young, we let them try, we let them fail, and those are very powerful lessons. Like lessons you want your kids to have.
So
So if you can facilitate that happening by saying, okay, you make your choice, you're going to deal with the consequences, but in a nice way, you say that. Okay,
this is,
they're good lessons.
it's literally and figuratively letting them make falls and get bumps and scratches and bruises on the skateboard so that they don't do it behind the wheel recklessly when the accidents really count. You with me on that? So
Is an analogy.
yeah, as the metaphor of it, like both literal and figurative, you let them make some mistakes when it's still safe, that when the risks aren't really huge. And man, it's powerful. It's really powerful. So again, we'll circle back with decision making, reaction cultures, how we explain things. So for the one example, if you have a son or daughter that you're in called the drama triangle, and it seems like no matter what interaction you have with that person, it seems to be the same interaction, whether you're talking about this or that, it ends up being the same interaction with them. You with me on that? And so every time you want to explain something, your son or daughter is like, oh, here we go again. And the wall goes up. Or every time they ask, you go into your mode of, ooh, I'm going to tell you. And sometimes it becomes a battle of the wills, right? Whether they're 3 or 13 or 33. Some of you have some basement dwellers. You're still like, wait, we still have the same issue. What's going on here? Right? I have a coaching client that I was working with that has an older child, still living at home after a long time. And I was like, what? And we were talking about the dynamics, and like, yep, those dynamics have been there for like a decade or more. And I was like, it falls on you to totally alter the dynamics, to break out of the drama triangle of what it's called. And so now something comes up and they're like, ooh, they're gonna play their role exactly. And you're like, ooh, I'm not playing that role. And you step out and they don't know what to do. Because they're fully expecting you to do the same thing you've done for years. And you're like, I don't do that anymore. And they don't know what to do. Sometimes they come unglued. They're like, why are you yelling at me, mom or dad? And you're like, I don't do that anymore. Look, what? You just rocked their world. And you're like, well, we're gonna address things like this now. And when you kind of have that pattern interrupter, you can start engaging. So it's been really cool to watch this with this client, because this older child now is just kind of owning some of the consequences and decisions, and has just stepped out of the drama triangle and is now making better decisions and responding way better to conversations than they used to, because it was always this same, oh, I know how to play this role.
Well, people do that. I see this all the time with myself, with our kids, with other people. We naturally, if we have this drama going on with someone instead of being aware and intuitive to our own desires, thoughts, feelings, choices, we are always on the defensive of trying to defend ourselves to this person. So there's so much defending going on, right? So much energy is going into explaining to mom why what I'm doing is right, that you never have the chance to sit here and think about, well, what am I doing and is it right? Right? So when you finally get rid of that and this is gone, now I'm left with myself saying, is that the right thing? Is that what I want to do? Is this what I want for my life? Right? And even small,
that's
younger
so
kids.
Key.
Oh, it's super
like
key.
When you remove the defending or attacking element, who's with me on this? When you remove the defending or the attacking element, now there's communication.
Well, and now not only communication between you, but communication. What you really want is your children to communicate with themselves. That has been a part of our message since our children were small. What kind of person do you want to be? You have to help them make that connection with themselves. And as much as possible, you need to get out of the way.
See how we remove that from everyone else? Now it's totally independent. It's on them. We're not saying this, that, and the other. It's like, what kind of person do you want to be? We've removed all the barriers. They don't have to sit there and feel like they have to fight and defend their position, because their only position is, what kind of person do you want to be?
What do you really want? What do you really want? Now, sometimes it takes a time for them to actually figure that out. But when you allow people, aka your children, to get in touch with what it is they want to be and who they are and what they want to do as a result of that, then disciplining and parenting becomes easier, because there's very few people, unless they're psychotic, who actually want things that are harmful for themselves and others. So if you can help them to get in touch with what they really want, well, what they really want is actually probably what you want too.
But I've removed this, son or daughter, this is what I want for you. They're like, ooh, don't do that to me. Even if inside they're like, I want the same thing too, but just because you're saying it, I'm not going to do it. So remove that.
That's just human psychology.
Yeah.
We all do that.
We all do it, right? Oh, that's good stuff. That's so good. Okay, should we address the specific thing around food? Yeah. There was a food culture.
So we had, I think in the last, was it the last formula session where we talked a lot more about criticism and using your peaceful voice. Remember that whole discussion we did? So if you want more about that, I think it was the last one we did about that, which kind of deals with, we got like 3 questions here. And the first one kind of deals with that. Like, how do you actually correct children without criticizing them and without being harsh? Now, we could talk about this, because I don't remember if we did, about if you mess up and you speak to them harshly and you criticize them, like, is there some sort of debriefing you can do or processing you could do that can help with that?
I'm going to do this today. I already did a little bit of it. I'm going to go find my son after this. And I would have done it earlier, but I have been gone all day, like busy like crazy. And I'm going to go find him, and I'm going to apologize and explain that it was me, not him. And I'm going to reaffirm to him, never stop asking me for wild things. Because what he asked to do today was wild. But I want him to do that. I want him to ask me wild, crazy things. Because I want him to be that kind of person. I want him to be the kind of person that just thinks up crazy ideas and says, why not? And goes and asks for it. Because very often in life, you guys will get wild results because we're willing to ask wild things. And I want my son to be that way. So I'm not going to shut that down. What kind of culture does that establish? What kind of mindset does that establish if I inadvertently overreact when he asks wild things? And unfortunately, my kids know that. We've done some pretty epic stuff. But I want to reaffirm that.
Our 10-year-old was reminding us, he asked if he could go skydiving in Mexico.
Yeah.
And we said yes.
And we said yes. So our 10-year-old son, Atlas, went skydiving. It was epic. Love you, buddy. So follow up with it. I guess here's the key thing. Um, when you apologize, don't justify, don't rationalize, but there might be some form of explanation, and then follow it up with real action. Because as I love to say, if you don't live the message, you suck as the messenger. Uh-huh. I said it. And it's true. And it's in those little messages. If I go apologize and say I'm not gonna do that anymore, and then I do it tomorrow, what kind of culture is that establishing? That, ooh, man, that one gets me. Because I saw a lot of that. So much of that when I was in my youth and my teens. A lot of talk followed by very little action, and that was the culture and the reputation that got established. So back it up. Back it up with your actions. And even, I know some of you are like, what if I'm the only one that does it in my family? Great. Be the one. And eventually you're going to bring the tide, like we always talk about. Be that one. And it's hard sometimes. It's hard when everyone sits down to a movie and then some horrible, disgusting, poisonous treats, and you're the only one that doesn't partake. But be that person and do it joyfully. Don't put on this sad face of like, woe is me, I'm not eating the junk food. Be like, yeah, I love these kale chips. I love
This is a lie.
this is a but kale chips are amazing. Get some kale chips and some seaweed chips, and you'll be sitting over there like munching on seaweed, those seaweed things. Oh, kale chips, seaweed, you'd be like, you guys are missing out. And like you got green things all over your teeth, and you're like, this is the best.
Oh gosh, this is ridiculous.
That's how I roll. I like it.
I know
Okay.
you do. That's funny.
Let's keep going. So there was a food culture question that we're going to address.
Well, I guess I just want to say yes, using a debriefing or processing after something happens. Maybe it's an explosion. Maybe it's just a disagreement. Maybe you kept your cool and the kid didn't get what they wanted and they're upset. Like debriefing afterwards, processing is another word for that, are all great strategies.
Or
And it's
with squabbles between children, let everything cool way down, and then maybe at a moment be like, hey, can you see how I get how you felt? So you validate and acknowledge. You say, you see how maybe your sibling was feeling super left out. And so because they were feeling so left out and so lonely, they were really trying to get your attention. And I realized that that annoyed you. And so you snap back, but can you see how what they were feeling kind of brought that about? And when I'll do that with my kids, they're like, oh, totally. Man, I feel bad. I'm gonna go spend time with him or her. Right. And they're of their own accord, they're like, oh, I'm gonna go do something special for them right now. I'm gonna go make them a smoothie. I'm gonna go take them and do something. It's really cool because you're helping them process and see the big picture of it all.
Yeah, which is essentially you're helping them to understand the psychology of perhaps what's happening in those interactions. Because, and I see this all the time. In fact, I saw it today with our 7-year-old. Her older brother was cutting her a mango to eat. We're here with there's 3 families. There's I don't even know how many kids are here. It's a lot of kids. But one of the other kids that's here also wanted a mango. Well, her older brother tried to get her to share with this girl, even then came in and got me to help. And I went in and I tried, but I could see she was not going to share. It just wasn't going to happen. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to push this issue. She came to me, she came in the room where I was later, and I said, hey, Sage, what's up? How come you didn't want to share your mango? And she came over to me and she cuddled with me and she explained that she felt like this girl had been mean earlier, and she, all these other things she explained, she just didn't feel like sharing with her. And so we were able to talk through it and understand what was happening. And that right there creates greater understanding, greater clarity, greater awareness, right? So that she's better able to articulate her own feelings and her own understanding of what's going on. And then, she said something like, yeah, when I don't feel well, Mom, I know I can just come talk to you and we can figure it out or whatever, and like that's what
That's
needs
huge.
to happen. Now, what could have happened is I could have gone in there, I could have gotten mad, I could have been like, you know what, Sage, you have to share. Sharing's nice. Sharing's what we need to do. I could have given all those lectures.
That's what we do. We share.
We're supposed to share. But I knew that you can kind of tell when your kids are not going to cooperate, right? And so in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to push this thing again. Like, okay, this is on you. I'm going to let you decide. I already know that she knows sharing is a good thing, right? So I'm not going to push it. I'm going to ultimately let her decide and deal with the natural consequences that come. Like, of course, the friend was not super excited that she didn't share with her, right? She wanted some mango too. But what happens as a result is more powerful because we have a conversation, we create awareness, and she sees a bigger picture of when I'm having a problem or not feeling right, I can come and talk to Mom. And she mentioned also she can talk to Aaliyah and she can talk to Kaya, that she is creating awareness of all these things.
She is already a woman at 7.
Oh, I know. It's crazy.
It's all these things that are upsetting me, and I need to talk to another woman to solve it.
I know.
That's awesome.
She said something else that was so cute. I didn't tell you. She was like, I don't know why. I just am starting to love Dad so much more. I just am like, oh, I just love him. It was so cute. Anyways, but like that's kind of the idea, is that we're trying to create awareness. We're trying to help our own children become aware of themselves and what they want and what they should do and what makes them feel better and what are the right actions to take. And if we have this element of force, like I'm trying to force you to do the right thing, they can't have that own awareness on their own because they're so busy defending themselves against us forcing them to do the right thing.
Yes. Now, in order to help our kids understand what's going on, we also need to try to understand what's going on.
Right.
So reading the books that we're offering, the books that really talk about the psychology of what's happening in relationships, and a book like Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, tons of wonderful psychology in there that applies to your children, and you'll be able to be like, oh, wow, I totally get what's going on here. Or you'll understand yourself or your spouse and go, whoo, okay, I've been reacting in this drama triangle with my kids all along because I'm frustrated about this thing over here. Mm-hmm. Right? When you start to unlock that, it's so powerful.
Well, just because you mentioned that, I'm going to add this on too, because this was a realization I had recently about raising children, because at some point you have to switch from raising kids to having interactions with men or women, because as they're becoming teenagers, that's what's going on, especially with teenage girls. And so you have to know, okay, when am I supposed to, because it changes too. It can change day to day with them because they're still figuring it out.
One day they're a child, the next day they're adult.
Right.
And you got to be nimble.
So you have to know, okay, am I dealing with my child daughter here, or am I dealing with a woman who needs validation and she needs me to listen to her without giving her answers, right? Which all comes from Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. That right there is a very powerful strategy. Because if you can do that, if you can understand, oh, this is my teenage woman who just needs someone to listen to her right now, that can solve a lot of problems, instead of like, oh, well, let me give you the answers, which I do, and guys like to do that all the time. But when
because we have all the answers.
I know, right? When you can do that, it makes parenting that much easier in those instances, because you're not just trying to tell them what to do, you're just helping them process their own feelings.
Is this hitting home, you guys? Who's with me on this? And especially as your kids get older, like as teens, it starts happening when they're teens, and then it gets more and more frequent. You're doing less parenting and more mentoring. And the more you mentor effectively, the more effective your parenting is. We had this conversation. We took our oldest daughter out to dinner last night and had this conversation with her, and she's just, just facing this big, vast world and all these opportunities. And we didn't like tell her what she should do. We just listened, like, here's something to consider. Here's an option. And afterwards, she was like, she's like, you guys, thank you so much for not telling me how I should live my life, because she's getting a lot of that right now from other sources. And she's like, thanks for just listening. And then, like, with that kind of relationship, she's gonna be like, I'll just do whatever you guys say, right? Because we're not like shoving it down her throat. Like, you got this, Kyle. You can do this. And she's like, yeah, right. It's really special. It's really awesome. Okay, I gotta just chime in. This is so funny. Mary, this is hilarious. Mary said, I cooked the kale chips before supper last night and ate them all before anyone else got a chance.
That's awesome.
Yes. That is so awesome.
Okay,
There
so we had another. So actually, the second question was about marriage and finances, and we actually did an entire podcast about that.
It is awesome. If you have not listened to it yet, go listen. I think it's episode 151, marriage and money.
The most recent episode at this point, 152 actually.
152. Go listen to that one, because if you guys are married and if you use money, you'll need to listen to this and figure things out.
This is a good episode.
And share it with anyone else you know who's married and uses money.
If you know anyone like that. Okay. So then the last question here was about family culture as related to food, but also to, criticizing each other and fairness, right? He got more than me. It's not fair. Those types of things.
It's why this is what happens in our family, because we use pure maple syrup. Like we'll do like,
because health benefits.
Yeah, so we'll use that on like our German pancakes, right? And our younger ones, of course, either can't handle the heavy bottle and they pour too much, or they purposely just pour too much. And it's like way more syrup and just a little bit of food. And so in an effort, and this is a tricky one, you guys, because in an effort to teach them about healthy eating and portions, there's this really, there's a real danger of criticism that comes from you and then comes from the siblings.
Right.
Oh, the siblings, they want to get in on that. They're like, yeah, you're pouring too much. And then they're not as gentle or soft. And we're like, whoa, like put away the cannons. Like, we got this, right? And you have to work through those dynamics. And that's one of the issues.
So,
too much peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah. Also, not making sure each family member got their fair share, because, there's some kids take more than they should. And some kids end up not getting any because others took too much. So the question is, how do we handle this? How do we help meal times go more smoothly? How do we stop the contention? How do we stop the criticizing?
How do we establish a really good food culture in our family and a culture around food in our family?
So I know for us, because we dealt with these same things, and this applies, I think, in almost any situation, especially one that becomes chronic. When you chronically know something's going to happen, like, mealtime and we have syrup, there's going to be an issue, right? When you know that that's a thing, and sometimes we forget, like we get in the moment, we're like, how did I forget that this was like going to be an issue? But what I like to do is I like to be proactive. And this is true whenever we go to someone, we do a lot of traveling. Whenever we go to someone's house that we're visiting, whenever we go into a restaurant, whenever we're going to be doing something where I know there's a potential for misbehavior or behavior that I don't want, I'm proactive and I talk about it before it happens. So I'll say, okay, we're going to have syrup on our German pancakes. Now, Sometimes we have the tendency to pour too much syrup on our pancakes. So before we eat this, I want to have a talk about it.
And see how she's using we instead of you little rascal, and that, instead of naming, pointing fingers, making people feel bad, it's just a we. It's like, hey,
this
sometimes
is a family problem.
we do this, right? And so it does.
And sometimes the kids will be like, yeah, that one. And I'm like that. We're not pointing any fingers.
Don't do that.
Okay. We're just talking about this. Now, I have this thing that I do in our family where I call it a class. And sometimes it's just for fun. I call it that. But sometimes it's an actual thing. And so sometimes I'll be like, you're not allowed to pour your syrup. In this case, I'll point them out because you haven't passed the syrup pouring class yet. Right? And that simply means that mom is going to show you exactly how much to pour and exactly how much is the right amount. And once you've passed that class,
and she watches you do it correctly, then you're like, hey, you passed the syrup pouring class, right? They love it. They buy into it.
Someone who has passed the syrup pouring class gets to pour your syrup for you. Okay. That thing works. I use that I'll come up with it on the spot. Like if they're doing something, I'm like, wait, you haven't passed that class yet. Like, let me take over here for a second.
Using markers.
And they get it. They get the context of that. And so they're like, oh yeah, I haven't passed that class. Like there must be something about this I don't know yet because I'm apparently doing something wrong. So I go into it with this planning on things potentially going wrong, and we're going to prevent it. We're going to be proactive about it. And we're going to teach the principles like too much syrup. So we're going to show you like, here's the class on the right amount of syrup. And you could even make this fun. Like, okay, I'm going to teach the class. I'm going to show you, here's the right amount. Now you all get a turn practicing, and maybe you're all going to pass right now. Who knows, right? So you just kind of make it fun. And I do that with going into restaurants. I do that going into people's house. I review the manners. Okay, when we go into this house, and I make this fun too. Are we going to scream and yell and stand on the table? And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. Are we going to say please and thank you? Yes, we are. And I just go through all of the things that I'm reminding them that I want them to do, right? Instead of getting in the moment, they're acting like barbarians, and you're like, you're not supposed to do this, right? It's easier. Well, what's amazing too is it's easier to remind them in the moment if they're doing something of like, hey, remember we talked about manners? And they're like, oh yeah, we're not going to do that thing. Okay. So that's one of my big strategies that I use.
Which is huge. This has been Rachel's superpower, and it has changed so much and prevented so much. Really, that's the key. It's prevented so much. So it's preventative. And then even now she still does it with the littles, but I know all the teens are hearing it. Now they're hearing the same thing, but the message they're getting is like, oh yeah, we have great manners. We help out, we clean up, we're respectful, we're leaders. Like, so our teens go and they take the message like, we're going to go in and set an example here. We're really going to lead out. It's awesome. And you do the same thing with your teens. And then you do the same thing with yourself, honestly. Here, little side note here. I learned this little acronym from this other leader. He said I use the CUP acronym. Every time I'm going to interact with any person, I use the CUP acronym. And I remind myself before I interact with people, I'm going to care, I'm going to uplift, and I'm going to praise. How would your interactions with everyone change if you reminded yourself to care, to uplift, and to praise? We would all be better communicators. We'd all have a better culture around interpersonal skills.
Well, and I think that's perfect because ultimately that's what we do want to do with our children, of course. When we're having an interaction, whether it's mealtime, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's just daily life, one of the reasons I think we get into the habit of criticizing is because we're not being proactive enough about caring, uplifting, and praising. And if we can focus more of our words, of our energy, of our attention on caring, uplifting, and praising our children, it actually encourages them to have more positive behaviors, which then naturally eliminates more negative behaviors. So when you can focus on being proactive, taking preventative measures, praising and uplifting, making things fun, then that helps our kids do the things we want to do instead of what the norm for a lot of people, and I know I did this very often, I still do it sometimes, is you don't want them to do something, and so you focus on telling them what you don't want them to do in a way that turns into criticizing, shaming, all of these negative things, which just doesn't work.
And it establishes a culture of criticism and correction all the time, instead of focusing on things that are going well.
And what you actually want instead. It's not that you don't want them to pour too much syrup. What you want them to do is to pour the right amount.
Oh, baby, this is good. So everyone, pause for a second, take a quick inventory. Do you spend, if you were to pie chart your words, do you spend more time talking about what you want or talking about what you don't want? Ooh, that's a good one.
That's a huge life philosophy, right?
Right, a big life philosophy. Am I going through life talking about the things I want, my dreams, my goals, what I'm chasing? Or do I go through life complaining about all the things that are wrong in the world with the government and with all this, that, and the other, and nothing works out? Jeez, there's an endless amount of things to complain about. It's like you're going to be as rare as a unicorn if you walk around just talking about good things. They'll be like, do you live in, where have you been for the last 100 years? You think things are still good? Right? But isn't that who we want to be? So we'll offer that same question to you guys. What kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be the person that's always talking about what you want, what you're excited about, what you're grateful for, what you're working on? Or do you want to be the person that's always going around dripping with complaints and how everything's going down the drain?
But again, back to the tying this into changing mealtime, changing homeschooling, changing whatever it is you're doing in family life. If you want to change the dynamics about that and the culture around it, you simply make a switch of focusing on what you don't want to focusing on what you do want instead. And very often I just do that very thing. I'm like, okay, I don't like this. I don't want it. What do I want instead? And then I focus on teaching that to them. This is what I want. This is the vision of what we're trying to do here. This is the vision of what our family can be like. This is the vision of who we want to be as people.
And this can be challenging for us. And I'm guessing that you can all relate with me on this. That can be challenging because right now, all your attention and energy and focus is, I have to address that. I could not let that slide. Ooh, that needs my attention. And we are constant firefighters instead of like builders. We're going to go over here and we're just going to build what we want. And this just kind of takes care of itself and it goes away. You with me? But we have this weird insatiable need to, I'm going to address that. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to yell about it. There are consequences coming. Bam, 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 bam. And we're so focused over here. We're not going, well, let's focus on what we do want, right?
In the van?
Yeah. So two things that I want to share. They mentioned something about fairness. And that comes up a lot in families. Does that come up in your families? That's not fair. He this, she that. Well, why do you? And what's cute is when the kids are like, why do you and mom get to do it? I'm like, what do you mean? What? We're the parents. Like I earned this stuff. Why do I get to buy things and eat it? Because I bought it. You didn't. No, it's funny. We razz them for that. It's funny. But from the get-go, we've always had this little saying in our family, fair, nothing's fair. Where's this idea of fair come? Fairs are where pigs win ribbons. That's what we always say in our family. And our kids, they've heard that since they were born. what? So they don't even bring it up anymore. They don't even bring up fear.
Once in a while.
The little ones will, but the big ones are like, if I bring up that's one of the F words in our family. If I bring if I bring up the word fair, all my parents are gonna say is like, hey, what are you, little piggy? Win a ribbon or something? What is this? What's this idea of fair? Like, nah, we're all different. And I love to use this one. My daughter will come or something, just an example. And, well, he did this. I'm like, what? Are you telling me you're an 11-year-old boy or a 14-year-old girl? Like, what are we comparing here for? And then she's like, right? So again, this is one of those things of the comparing and competing, it just constantly causes problems. So let's just remove it. No comparing, no competing. But here's the big thing. So for the person who asked the question and for all of us, big underlying issues like we're always fighting around the food. Guess what? It's not about the food. In this case, I'm going to take a big, bold guess here. All of that is stemming from a scarcity mindset. It's too much peanut butter. Blasted. We bought one thing of blueberries and those things cost $7 and now they're all gone and I didn't even get any. And no, who finished off the yogurt? Who drank the last bit of milk? And who used up that stuff and put the carton back empty? Who did that? Right?
Is that a scarcity thing or just like an annoying
That's
thing?
just like, it's empty and they put it back. Well, at least they put it back. And here's what I want to share.
We're speaking from
experience.
Because
exactly.
we have been there.
That's exactly where I was going.
In the past.
You guys, so remember I grew up at 16, I was out on my own. And there were many times I did not have enough food. I did not have enough food. And so when I got married, I was still working on sharing. Can I confess here that even with my sweet new bride and our brand new little babies, it still hurt me to share food with them. I had to work on that. And I'm like, because I had gotten this, like, there's not enough. I'm like, when there's food, I got to eat it. And so we'd order something and Rachel would reach over and get some stuff. And I'd be like, she's lucky I love her and she's hot, because I would slap her hand right this, right? Like I had this scarcity issue and it stuck for a long time.
Well, and then at later times too, when we were broke and we had very little money and we would buy something nice like blueberries or pure maple syrup and you're like, wow, that costs so much.
And then it gets tipped over and it drains out the car and you're like,
not even,
no!
That happened on this trip, yes. But not even that. Then when your kids are pouring it on their pancakes and they're pouring too much, you're thinking,
there went $2 right there.
That's like $2 worth of syrup. Like that's your concern, right? And I get that. That's a real thing. But I guess the point, again, there's layers upon layers in everything in life. And one of the layers is a scarcity mindset of that there's not enough, we can't afford it, you're wasting our money. That's a whole nother issue that has to be resolved on its own in something like the Money Mastermind. But you should be aware that that is one of the issues.
And so inadvertently,
we're criticizing our kids.
Yes, we create a negative culture around food, but it's often stemming from our own issues.
Around money, as
an
example.
Is this hitting home with anybody? That's just one example. But you might have some issue from your past, from your parents, from your childhood, from your own insecurities, and it keeps coming out in your family culture
with the syrup.
And you're saying, guys, how do I fix this? Like, tell me what to say in this moment. When we're saying, go back over here and look inside and say, this isn't always the case, because you might be like, no, I'm totally good inside. Like, help me fix this problem. So sometimes it might be logistical. It might be strategy or system.
Right, because we're not saying because you have an abundance mindset, go ahead and waste the syrup. Like, you should still teach your kids how to pour the syrup, right?
Let's have syrup.
But it can be, this is the thing about life that's awesome. When you use every opportunity in life as something to help you create awareness and say, wow, the real issue here is I'm worried about wasting money on syrup. Maybe I have a scarcity problem, right? That's how you
Who's
grow.
who's done this with me? Who's done this? You've gotten upset, and after getting upset, you're like, that was worth about $3. And I just got upset at my kids over $3. Like, so what? Or $10 or $20 or $50. They break something, it's $50. And you're like, that kid just got a dad lecture over $50. That's not worth $5,000. Who's with me here? Like you gotta stop and like, oh man.
That doesn't mean there's not an appropriate time for certain lectures, but
although
point being,
dad
they
lectures don't
shouldn't
work.
be done in a way that's damaging to the
Right,
relationship.
and over simple things.
Right.
Here's a question. What is a good response when someone attacks you or the system when they are unhappy with the effect the system is having on themselves or that's exerting pressure on them? That's a really great question. And it's a solid question, right? How do we respond to that? I want to back up a little first, and again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, understanding the psychology. Like what's really happening? What's really being said? Because we got to back up and say, is the issue the system? Is the issue what you're doing? Is it causing undue pressure, or is it some form of collusion where you're causing your own problem? Is this a continuation of a drama triangle? Is it okay? I just met with a couple recently, coaching clients, and they're in their dynamics, super awesome couple. In their dynamics, they told me that they had kind of taken on the role of like, I will do work and you do home. And so then sometimes he would come home and he'd be like, why aren't you doing more in the house, right? Like this thing was not organized. And it almost like he played the role of a victim here, right? And I get this because I've done it too. I'm like, hey, this is your job. Or the other way, right? If there's any kind of money thing, she could turn around and say, hey, it's you. Right? But see how I might be putting undue pressure on her or playing the victim and not helping out. So, I mean, there's elements there we got to understand, like, what is it that's really going on?
Another thing that comes to mind is that in a journey of growth and progress, not every aspect of it is comfortable, fun, exciting, or awesome. In fact, growth is very often painful. Sometimes when people, especially initially, when people start on a journey like this, so maybe, I don't know, whatever's going on. Again, I think we'd need more details to get more specific here, but if you're suddenly like, hey, yeah, you decide these things, or you deal with the consequences of these choices, or whatever, all of that, that can be a very painful experience. And people's natural response is to want to blame. Like that's a very natural human response. I need to blame someone for this. Like I'm having to deal with the consequences of my choices, but I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. It's frustrating. It's annoying. I'm going to blame you, or I'm going to blame God, or I'm going to blame the government, or I got to blame someone, right? For what's happening. So you're unhappy with that, of the effects, the consequences, and you want to look for someone to blame, because accepting personal responsibility is very, very hard to do, especially if you've never been taught to do that, especially if you've always lived in a place of victimhood. It's hard the very first time, especially, to accept 100% responsibility for all of the things in your life. So that's painful. That's hard. That's
How would you do that to a spouse? So there's a couple different scenarios, or a lot of scenarios, right?
how would you respond
Let's
to
say
them, to that
Rachel
person?
comes to me and she's criticizing me or a system we have. I'm going to ask her why. I'm going to ask her what she thinks we could do. I'm going to ask her I'm just going to listen. I'm going to listen mostly.
Yeah.
And like, what is it that's what feels off to you? What is hard for you? What's painful for you? What's frustrating? What's the real issue? Let's get down to the real issue. What is it that's really bugging you? And one side is, maybe I'm not doing enough. And if she can come up and say, look, if you were just helping with this would go better. I'm like, done, I'm in. Like, that's more work for me, more responsibility for me, but I can see how it'd lighten that load. I'm in. That's one scenario. Another scenario.
That might not seem fair, but again, fair is not real. Okay, there is no such thing as fair. That's one. Back to the idea with the fair is where pigs win ribbons. We teach our kids life isn't fair. So if sometimes you don't get blueberries because everybody else ate them. Oh, I was going to mention this before because I see this too often in parenting. All of the cake gets eaten, and someone didn't get some. And guess what? The whole emphasis is on how unfair it was for this child to not get cake. That's the wrong response. Now, we might mention it. We might say, hey, guys, you know what? That wasn't very nice to eat all the cake, so this person didn't get some. But do you know what we teach just as importantly? We tell that kid, life's not fair. Sometimes you don't get cake. You just have to learn how to deal with disappointment. Okay, that's a critical lesson to teach your kids.
And learn how to deal with it, not just wallow in it and live in it. Some people, if you don't help them process it, they're like, life sucks. There's never enough. I know, just my luck. Nothing good will ever happen to me. That's not processing. Like, you're teaching your kids how to say, man, life can be tough. I'm going to lean in and make the most of it. Not life's hard.
And maybe we can give them strategies like, well, we called you and you didn't come, so you missed out, or whatever, you were gone, and sometimes when you're gone you miss out. Like, whatever, you walk through the scenarios and help them understand, but you also help them understand this is just a part of life. Life's not fair. Back to what we were saying.
Oh, so the one side is, I need to help out.
It's not fair for you to take more.
I'm listening to her, and it may not be fair, but I'm like, okay, let's try it. Let's try that and see if that alleviates some pressure. The other scenario might be that she's just not taking ownership. She's not doing her part. And so she's not getting the results, and it's painful, it's uncomfortable. And so she's lashing out at me or the system or whatever for her own stuff. Again, I'm going to listen.
And
she wants to be heard. I'm going to listen.
Yes.
I'm going to listen some more. I'm going to listen somewhere until she has nothing else to say. I'm going to listen and listen. When she's all out of things to say, because sometimes women just like to be heard. And I'll be like,
often,
anything else you'd like me to hear? And she's like, no, I actually feel a lot better. And let's do this together. And I'm like, I didn't have to say a word. She just wanted to be heard.
Or I might say, actually, I feel a lot better. And, I really need to do this.
And then I would say, dang straight. No, I wouldn't. I'd say, oh, okay. How can I help? She'll come to her own conclusion. I'll say, how can I help? Now, every once in a while, be very careful with this. Every once in a while, you might offer like, well, what if you tried this thing? Would that help you get the results you want? And it's got to be tactful. It's got to be adroit.
But I think
all the guys are like getting sweaty palms. Like,
yeah. I think that if this is with a woman, either spouse or daughter, that is a good strategy. Because very often, again, it's the whole defensive thing. If they feel they have to defend themselves against you and what you're inflicting on them or whatever, however they see that, Sometimes they just literally need you to sit and listen until they've got nothing else to say about it.
Which is, that's so cute. I love,
Yeah.
Stephanie, what you just said. That's
Exactly.
awesome.
Right. Because a lot of times a woman knows what she needs to do, or knows she can go to you for help, but she doesn't feel ready to do that, to act on it, or to ask for help until she gets everything else out of the way, because it's blocking things. So what that turns into is attacking you or the system. That's what it turns into, because she feels defensive.
Ooh, here's another scenario, possible scenario. We're just throwing out possibilities here because I know this is going to hit home. These principles are going to hit home with all of us. If she's expressing frustrations, but I'm being too sensitive and taking things personally.
Yes, this happens in men are from Mars and women are from Venus all the time. In fact,
are you attacking me?
Yeah, I am.
Is this? Oh yeah, you men are sensitive. Is this what
you
this
guys
is
are
going
sensitive
right now?
That's right.
Gosh, this kind of hurts right here.
I know. No, but they talk about this in this book, where when a woman is expressing all of her things and getting everything out and talking, the man is sitting there saying, she thinks I'm a piece of crap. Like I can't even do anything.
My systems are broken. I'm broken. She just thinks I'm worthless.
Yes.
And that's not happening. But
now,
we men feel that
like
way.
That's happening. She may even say things like that.
What am I, chop suey? I don't do anything around here.
But she's really just trying to get things out. She's trying to get everything out. And you, men, have to be man enough to take it without feeling too hurt. And without...
Where's your mic to drop that one? All the poor guys are like,
I know.
Dagger.
Without turning it into an argument, because all she really wants is for you to listen. If you did that, if you just listened through the whole thing with appropriate, yeah, okay, yeah, then she can get it all out and then feel bad about attacking you and then be ready to solve the problems.
But I cannot be too sensitive. I cannot take it personal, and I can't feel attacked. So I think this is the key insight. You may not, men, she may not be attacking you. You just feel attacked. You rolling with me here? This is the best thing I ever learned. Sit and listen, not take anything personal. And after she's done, she's like, I feel better. I'm like, sweet, me too. Unless I take it all personal, I'm like, oh, I don't feel better. Now I feel terrible. Right?
So
and then
it's
terrible. Or whatever. I feel like you have to go fix every problem in the world. It's just not, it's not that. So yeah, and great point here. Moms, daughters, sisters, everyone you interact with. You guys, doesn't this apply to all of our interactions with men and women and children and elderly? And like when we start to understand psychology and understand ourselves, and we, again, circling back, when we create this culture and reputation of who we are and how we do life, oh man, it starts to eliminate all the problems around food and around entertainment and around reactions and overreactions and being proactive versus reactive and all the little things we do, how it all fits together, because we're trying to be super cognizant and aware of what we're doing and why. And when we're more deliberate and intentional, everything gets easier and better, you guys. Easier and better. Man, I love this stuff. Okay. Boom. Good. This is good. Anybody got some takeaways for today?
Or any other questions?
Yeah. Any other questions? We can stick around for a minute for anything. Any questions? Anything. Free game. You can ask the most awkward question ever. Wow. The one you've always wanted to ask, but you've been afraid to ask. Throw down. Rachel and I have gotten to a place where, like, bring it. Whatever you ask, like, okay. I'm not afraid of any questions anymore. Yeah, you're probably
you
like,
don't have to ask awkward questions either.
Yeah, you can ask normal questions too.
It's like, how are you supposed to respond to that?
Yeah. I just want to talk about taxes.
Or we can go to.
Yep. If you have any questions, we will wrap it up. And then I want you to our invitation tonight. Actually, let's do this if you don't mind. Everyone jot down one takeaway, one thing you want to work on from what we've talked about. We've gone on all kinds of tangents here. And so everyone just pick one thing, one takeaway you want to work on tonight. One little piece, and it might not even relate to anything we talked about. You might have had this little burst of inspiration or aha, like, ooh, I'm going to focus on that. What's your takeaway? What's the thing you're going to focus on? What are you going to work on? I'm going to work on very open responses to wild requests. Because I want my kids to have wild requests. I really do.
Because people who have wild imaginations end up changing the world.
Yeah, so true. Okay, here we go. Here's one. Just listening time, talking about
Listening.
and
Wait, are you doing this?
oh, yep. I was reading two things because the chat moved up while I was reading and I skipped to the next one. Just listening to my adult daughter and not reacting to her blame and anger.
Yes.
Okay, we had this huge insight that, and we were just talking about this, that moms can sometimes take on the man role with their daughters. Oh, like, well, I'm just going to tell her what's up. You're like, no, you need to listen to a woman who's just talking.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's huge. So that's a great one. Love that. Okay, next.
Spend more time talking about and focusing on what I want to do, not what I don't want.
Yes. Let's all do that together.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to get caught up in all the crap that's going on in the world right now. I'll just make a prediction here. In the next few years, you guys, this wonderful country of ours is going to fall to pieces.
Well, that's quite the prediction.
Have a nice day. It's oh man, there's economic
we should start
stuff.
A coaching group just for that.
Yeah, legit. In fact, we ought to do some, and I'm not kidding here. We ought to do some serious coaching about preparing for what's coming. The economy is going to shift. Sociology. I know it's all going to shift. You guys know it's coming. The writing's on the wall. Everyone looks around and be like, oh, I see it coming. There's probably some war stuff coming. Like it's coming. And so we should all talk about it and prepare for it.
Since we can't post it on social media.
On top of all the crazy technology stuff that's coming, within 3 years from now, you guys, we're going to be all wearing some kind of eyewear.
Now you're getting really weird.
I know.
Don't even.
But this is all augmented reality. It's coming. So instead of looking at our screens, so we're all living life like this now. They're projecting within 3 years, they're going to have eyewear, either contacts or glasses, that show you everything. We're gonna be living in a virtual world, and if we don't settle ourselves and have habits and routines, it'll. Whoo! Okay, that was a crazy thought from Greg.
Yeah.
Okay.
You grew up here.
Okay. I'm going to try to say yes more to my kids. Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that one. With my clients, I tell them, I said, be the yes dad. Literally build a reputation with your kids. Be the yes dad. And when they ask you for crazy things, say yes and go do it. So one of my clients, he's like, they were out and they went on this family trip and their kids were like, Dad, can we go higher ballooning? He's like, yes. Okay. And they went. And he's like, well, can we rent some things? He's like, yes. And they went. And he's like, that was our best vacation we ever had because I just said yes to these cool things. And they're like, Dad, can we play in the mud? Dad, let's go jump in that freezing river at midnight. He's like, okay. And they went and did it. Like, become yes people. Wait.
It's hard to listen, yes.
Yeah, it's hard to listen, yes.
You're right. To not take it personally.
Well, okay, so there's a perfect example. We gotta roll with this comparison, because just like a man sometimes takes it personal when his wife is expressing her frustrations, a mom will take it personal when a child is expressing their frustrations. She's like, it's my fault, right? I'm like, because Rachel's expressed that before. She's like, when the kids are complaining about something, you feel all the guilt, like it's your fault. I'm like, you didn't create that. But you're like, I feel like it.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a role reversal. It's really insightful. So don't be the man, Mom.
Don't be
um, okay, my takeaway is listen until they have nothing else to say without taking it personally the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah. Another one. You go ahead.
Work on translating this to my adult children and ask how I can support them, whether they ask for help or not, and respect either way. Yep.
Yes, beautiful. Right? And especially as your kids get older and older, your mentoring role has to be super tactful and diplomatic. And my thought is you and I as parents, we have to keep leveling up if we want to keep any kind of influence with our adult children. When your kids become teens and young adults and adults, you have to keep growing and leveling up, or they will discount you.
Because they feel like they then moved past you and now they're looking down at you figuratively instead of up at you because you are ahead of them.
If they feel like they've outgrown you, they won't listen anymore. So keep outgrowing them. Make it a competition. Just kidding. Don't do that. That would be troublesome. But just keep growing. My kids are never going to catch me. Sorry, kids.
And what this means is that you're pursuing your own goals and dreams. You're doing whatever it is that lights you on fire. That's inspiring to them. That's staying ahead of them.
My kids are never going to be out chasing goals, looking back at Rachel and me like, geez, those guys aren't doing anything with their lives. They're going to be like, we can't keep up. Where's mom and dad? Like, this is crazy. Like, we're pace setters, right? They're going to, oh man, this is awesome. I love this stuff. Okay, next. Building a farm. Yes. Build the farm, people. That's one of the solutions.
Oh, I was going to add this because I actually, if you have not listened to this book or read this book, you should. It's called The Fourth Turning. And I just finished it. And one of the things they said at the very end, I don't know if you remember this, they said, how can you prepare? Okay, so I'll give you a quick synopsis of this.
Let's do it next
time.
Very
quick. Just super quick because I want to say one thing about it.
Okay, ready?
There are cycles in history. And we are in the fourth cycle right now. This is not a conspiracy theory book. These are academic historians. The reading's a little bit dry, not going to lie. We're in the fourth turning right now. One of the things they said, they wrote this book during the last turning, which is called the third turning. And they were talking about how do you prepare for the coming fourth turning, which we're in now. And they said, one of the best things you can do to prepare is to be a great parent. So I just want to emphasize that. Being a great parent is one of the most important things we can do for our younger children and our adult children right now in this time of life.
Yes.
It's critical.
Critical because
I don't know
if I've ever said this before, but things are getting crazy.
Anyways, that's all I wanted to emphasize.
Okay,
be
so
a good parent.
We're getting some feedback here. We should do that next. How about next meeting we do the fourth turning, and we do the fourth turning. We do the changing world order.
Whoa.
And holy biscuits, and then maybe we hint at the great reset. You guys, we are not conspiracy theorists.
Every person who's not a conspiracy theorist says that, or who is a conspiracy theorist says that.
But I do got to say this. At some point, conspiracy theorists no longer theorists, they're right.
This is based purely on a study of history.
Yes, only talking history. This is not like aliens are coming stuff. Like if you study history very carefully, there were always people right before the crisis who called it. And all the people around him were like, you're just fanatical, you're just extremists, you're just, right? Wow. Man, how do we get off on this tangent? Okay, hold on. So focus, another one, focus more on what I want to see, do, and experience with my family, those relationships. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, let's have a crazy meeting on how to prepare for it and how we are preparing. Yeah, let's do that.
Good idea.
I think we'll get into that. I could start on the preparation right now. Cool. There's course Never Sink Farm. Right on. Super cool. Okay.
Not a conspiracy theorist. I know.
Nice.
Great. Good.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Come on. Yeah. We know where you live.
That's not even. I'm very uncomfortable with this whole conspiracy theory thing. Okay, I just don't like it.
You know why? Because we're both related to like hardcore preppers,
Yes.
and we're like, whoa, oh man. But in like all theory aside, if you step back and study history, there's always patterns, and there always will be, and we would be silly.
What's very fascinating? Again, we read a lot. When you're reading books like The Law by Bastiat, which was written around the French Revolution,
Which is so good.
And
Everyone
you're-
do that. Hey, it's so small, it's tiny. Will everyone read The Law before next time? If you read The Law before next time we meet, it's just teeny. It's like if you get an Audible, it's like 2 hours or something. Or just grab the book and read it. Just everyone read that. It is so relevant. It was written in the
Frederic
1800s.
Frederic.
Oh, it is Bastiat. Yeah, Frédéric Bastiat. If you want to read it in the original French, that would be epic. You're amazing.
Or read it in English.
Or English. English is fine, I guess, too. But read that or listen to it before next time. It will bring your thoughts.
And you're reading and studying things about the fall of the Roman Empire, and you're like, wow, this sounds very familiar because it's happening. Like, that's not conspiracy theory. That's
It's just history. It's like, hey, wow, this what happened, 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, 80 years ago is happening again. Yeah, we've read Atlas Shrugged, and there's some things like that happening. And she was dead wrong on a lot of things, I think. And it's so interesting stuff there. Yeah, let's talk.
But she was
This is,
right
but
on.
she was a brilliant. She was brilliant too, right? And great books, great ideas. So
Well then.
be excited for next time, and in between now and then, be afraid. Just kidding, you guys. Just kidding. I know some of you be like worrying at night now that all my optimism has gone away, and I'm just a raving
Predicting.
pessimist.
Catastrophe. Okay.
Exactly. Faith over fear. Exactly. And we operate with faith every day. Even when the sky is falling, you step back and say, look at this. It is gorgeous. Kids gather around, watch the sky fall. It's amazing. I love it. Okay. You guys are awesome. Thanks for being amazing human beings. Let's just quietly and deliberately establish the family cultures we want, and get them so ingrained that it just becomes a natural way of being. It's like, yeah, I don't even have to think about it anymore. We just do that. That's what we do, and do it deliberately. Okay, love you guys. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being awesome. Reach upward.